My name is Mohammad Yakcop. I'm 58 years old. I'm now the Minister of Finance of Malaysia. I started my career as a central banker in 1968. I left the central bank in 1994 for the private sector. But during the financial crisis of 1997-1998, the then Prime Minister, Tun Mahathir Mohamad, asked me to return to national service. So I returned to the government service, first serving as an advisor in the central bank, then as a special economic advisor to the Prime Minister, and since January this year as the second Minister of Finance. In school, in the upper secondary school, I found economics to be fascinating. Therefore, I took up economics at the university, and I worked in the central bank. And after a couple of years, the central bank sent me for an MBA course in Belgium, in the Catholic University of Belgium. And from then onwards, I found economics, finance, and later on Islamic finance to be a fascinating area. I felt that it was an area that could make much difference to the community in terms of economic standard, in terms of progress of a nation from agrarian economy to a developed country. So economics would be one of the most critical elements in the progress of a nation and the progress of a community. Of course, the other elements are important, the political, social. For economic aspect, the economic dimension would be a key component. The overriding aspect of economics to me is that we must have economic growth with equity, with a fair distribution. There is a school of thought that says that what matters is economic growth. Personally, I do not subscribe to that school of thought. I believe that as a nation, as a community, as we grow, there must be a strong rate of growth. We must grow. But as we grow, we must also ensure that the fruits of growth are fairly distributed among the various segments of the community. In fact, we must ensure that the growth must be biased slightly in favor of the less fortunate aspect of the community. This is in fact what we are doing in Malaysia, because in Malaysia we have a new economic policy where we ensure that the growth is fairly distributed. We of course do not believe in the principle of taking from Peter to give to Paul, no. But what we believe is that we believe in this concept of an expanding pie. As the pie expands, that portion of the pie which is new, which is the expanded portion of the pie, would be distributed in such a way that a bigger portion would go to the less fortunate. So that basically is my view of economics and economic growth, that the less fortunate segments of society must benefit significantly from any growth, and one of the objectives of economic growth would be to abolish poverty. We can look at Islamic banking in a number of aspects, from a number of viewpoints. The first perspective would be to look at it in terms of the Muslim community, the Muslim Ummah. In today's world, and increasingly so, the importance of banking and finance cannot be overemphasized. Willy-nilly, a community will have to be involved in banking, will have to be involved in finance, will have to be involved in the capital market, will have to be involved in the stock market to progress, to develop. The objective of Islamic banking and Islamic finance is to ensure that the Muslims are able to participate in modern banking, modern finance, in sophisticated products, while at the same time are not involved in areas prohibited by Islam, such as riba. That is one aspect of Islamic banking. The other aspect of Islamic banking is to make sure that progress and growth happens with equity, based on the basis of justice, because Islam emphasizes justice, and progress and distribution should, from the Islamic point of view, be based on justice. The third aspect, which is very important, is that Islamic banking and Islamic finance is not limited to Muslims only. In fact, in the case of Malaysia, a significant portion of Islamic banking is undertaken with non-Muslims. The idea is to, in the case of Malaysia and in the case of Islamic banking worldwide, is to show that the Islamic banking products are equivalent, if not superior, to conventional banking products, and they can be used productively by both Muslims and non-Muslims. No, it's just a new way of doing business, a more just way, because the usury in whatever religions, for example, Judo, Christianity, in Islam, is considered to be wrong, because usury, high interest rate, is oppressive. So, to the extent that an Islamic banking system, Islamic financial system, does away with usury, does away with areas which are haram, which are not considered, like such as gambling, etc., which does not serve a useful, productive purpose. To that extent, the quality of growth using Islamic principles and Islamic economics would be that much better than the quality of growth which is based on usury, which is based on areas prohibited, such as gambling. What is fair, for example, is relative. For example, if a nation develops, a nation grows at a very high rate of growth, but the rich keep becoming richer and the poor keep becoming poorer, that would be growth without equity. But in a system where there is growth, but the rich become richer, but the poor become less poor, that would be growth with equity. The gap between the rich and the poor should be reduced, but more importantly, we should get the population out of the poverty trap, the vicious cycle of poverty. We have to get them out, and growth with equity would aim at that. We have to improve the quality of life of the downtrodden and the less fortunate members of society. Yes, in the case of Malaysia, the world can be divided. The Islamic systems in the world can be divided into 4 models. The first is a situation where there are only conventional banks, no Islamic banks, and there are many countries of OIC, Islamic countries, where there are no Islamic banks. That's the first category. The second category is where the second category, at the end of the spectrum, are countries where there are no conventional banks, only Islamic banks. Example would be Sudan, example would be Iran, example could also be Pakistan. So that would be the extreme. In the middle, there would be the third category, where the existing system is conventional, but on the fringe of the existing system, there will be 1 or 2 Islamic banks. But they are not in the mainstream, just on the fringe, 1 or 2, to cater for special needs. That will be third category. The fourth category is a dual system. We have 2 systems operating in parallel, both equally sophisticated, both equally viable, both having large network, where the community, the citizens have a choice of choosing either the conventional or the Islamic. And there's only one country in that model, that's Malaysia. So far, we hope that other Muslim countries will also join us to have a dual system. It's workable, and it has been proven in Malaysia that the dual system is workable, and not only workable, it is a good system in that neither the conventional nor the Islamic can be complacent. One has to learn from the other, and one has to compete with the other and progress. Because if the Islamic banking system becomes complacent, the conventional system will overtake the Islamic banking system. So they have to work hard and keep track of each other. It is sophisticated enough, but whether or not it is possible would depend on the people. If ultimately, at the end of the day, everyone, Muslims and non-Muslims, are convinced that an Islamic banking system, an Islamic finance system, is more viable and better than a conventional system, and if all of them prefer to use Islamic banking products, then Alhamdulillah, inshallah, this will be possible. But at this stage of the growth of Islamic banking, I think our objective should be for a dual system. Let the people decide, and over time we have to work hard and to show the Islamic system is more competitive, more viable, more fair, both for Muslims and non-Muslims, and hope that it becomes a dominant system. But it is not important that this should happen in the short run. What is important is that we have an alternative system. Yes, we have grown by leaps and bounds since we started in 1983. When we started in 1983, there was only one bank, Bank Islam Malaysia, that was set up for the first 10 years, 1983, 1993. 1993, we opened up. We allowed conventional banks to open Islamic windows, and through that process, we enabled the citizens throughout the country to enjoy Islamic banking with no additional cost, really, because we didn't set up additional banks. We just allowed conventional banks to open Islamic windows. Since then, of course, we have set up a second Islamic bank, Bank Muamalat. And also 1985, we set up an Islamic insurance company called Takaful, the first Takaful business in Malaysia. And we find that they are coexisting very well. We find that the rate of growth of Islamic banking is very good. And we find that even the foreign banks operating in Malaysia are very keen to promote Islamic banking. None, especially none when you have a dual system. In fact, you have an advantage. You have both systems, and if at this point of time some products are easier with conventional, some products are easier with the Islamic system. At least for the country's point of view, you have two systems to optimize on it, at least for the time being. Eventually, we hope the Islamic system will have all the products. So having an Islamic banking system is in fact an advantage, because you have more choice. You have more ways of cutting the cake. When the economic crisis happened in 1997, for the 10 years prior to that, 1987, 1997, for the 10 years, Malaysia's growth was more than 7% per year, doing extremely well. Inflation was minimal, unemployment was non-existent, political stability was a given, political leadership was very good, external loans were minimal. In fact, we not only borrowed little, even the little that we borrowed, we were attempting to prepay ahead of time. We thought nothing could go wrong. We were all well advanced on the stage to achieve our vision 2020, which is to become a developed country by the year 2020. And suddenly, this financial economic crisis happened. It started in Thailand, as you know. The currency manipulators and speculators started attacking the Thai baht, and Thai baht was devalued very fast. And then there was this contagion effect, and they saw blood in Thailand. And so they just started attacking the ringgit. These hedge funds had large resources because for every ringgit of capital that the hedge fund had, they could borrow up to 20 times from the banking system. So if they had 100 billion of funds, it was multiplied by 20 times. That's the amount of resources they had. No central bank can fight them because our total foreign currency assets at that time was only 20 billion, which was nothing compared to the resources that the hedge funds had. So our currency depreciated very fast from 250. We were very stable at 250 for the last 10 years. 1987, 1997, we were around 250. It was a floating rate, but it was basically stable at 2.50 to $1. And within a short time, it was at 480 and looking at 5 ringgit. This sudden change was, of course, a shock to the system, to the economy. And stock market began to plummet. Confidence was shaken. The political, social fabric of society also became loose. And there was political and socio-economic dangers lurking. And we had to think very fast, and we have to get out of it. And of course, we could have gone to the IMF and asked for assistance, but that would have been at the expense of sacrificing our sovereignty, our freedom, and our ability to do things our way, and even to achieve growth with equity. All that may have to be sacrificed if we had gone to IMF. And even had we gone to IMF, it was not sure that we would have succeeded because of IMF's policy of one solution fitting all cases. So we thought of our own solution, our homemade solution. We came up with a number of measures, and we implemented them in September 1998. There was an outcry on the part of the world. The world thought that we had gone mad and that we are imposing rules which will bring us back to the dark ages. We were treated very badly by the international press. And our own people too, many of them were not sure whether we would succeed because this was somewhat unorthodox. This was very radical. But alhamdulillah, we succeeded. And of course, the rest is history. The recession is now one cycle behind, and immediately after implementing those measures, the country started to revive, and things became better, and we were up again on the path towards growth and prosperity. We succeeded, and the lesson learned was that we have to be alert all the time. We have to think outside the box. We have to make sure that we do not lose our independence, economic independence. And the lesson learned is that the importance of fiscal prudence and the discipline and the unity among the various segments of society are cardinal going forward. We have enough safeguards and enough alertness on our part to ensure that such a crisis is the probability of such a crisis is reduced. Is reduced. Some countries have come and studied our model, and we were of course very happy. Some Latin American countries to tell them what we did and why we did and how we did it. But each country will have to adopt the model based on its own economic conditions. because one of the necessary but not sufficient condition for our model is that you must have very good fiscal prudence and fiscal discipline, and you must have a social fabric which is supportive. You have the workers, the unions who are understanding of the hardships, initial hardships, and who are with you. But the model is there for all, and we are forever willing to help nations which are in trouble. The Muslim world, of course, is a riddle, one of the riddles of Allah, that if we take the list of Muslim countries based on wealth and income, you will find that some Muslim countries are at the highest and many are at the lowest. And of course, for those countries at the highest, the income is very high, but they may be dependent on just one or two products, oil, for example. So what the Muslim countries need to do is to grow and develop, and be able to be a little bit more self-sufficient among the community, to where the extra financial resources of the rich Muslim countries can be used to develop the poor Muslim countries. This is not happening now, and it is very sad, because most of the financial resources available in the rich Muslim countries are invested in developed countries, and almost the amount used to develop the poor countries almost negligible. One of the prerequisites for countries to move out of the poverty cycle, or to move out of the status of least developed countries to be on the path towards growth, is to have an adequate amount of infrastructure. Infrastructure is critical. In the case of Malaysia, we spend a large amount of resources developing infrastructure, the roads, the ports, the rail, and that helped, because that infrastructure allowed mobility, and along the routes they developed towns, and there was so much spin-off effects and so on. What I think we should do is we should somehow have a mechanism, develop a mechanism to enable a portion of the resources of the rich Muslim countries to be used to build infrastructure in the poor Muslim countries. Once that is done, I think the poor Muslim countries could at least be brought to a level from which they could take off by themselves. Efforts like Lariba, efforts by Lariba and is a good example to show that even in a Western environment, products based on faith, based on religion, can succeed, because the products of Lariba are based on certain ethical values, which are common in fact to Muslims and Jews and Christians, because usury is bad in all religions. Ethical investment is welcome in all religions. What Lariba is doing in terms of faith-based banking, in face of ethical banking, and the success of institutions such as Lariba, shows that Islamic banking need not be developed only in Muslim countries. It can be developed everywhere. I mean, Lariba proves the point.